All right, let's call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Here.
Malin Luttrell.
You're muted, Malin.
Here. Sorry about that.
Mark Webb.
Turn your mute off, Mark.
Here.
Margaret Firerobin.
Here.
Mark Byington.
Here.
Takai Shu.
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Scott Gaynor.
Here.
Kevin Buck.
I'm here.
Everyone is here, sir.
Thank you very much. The first thing we're going to do is to turn to our legal counsel. She has an announcement to read. Danielle?
Good evening, everybody. It's an announcement and also a request for you all to have a brief vote. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. As you know, the Open Meetings Act applies to the Planning Commission, and it normally prohibits governing bodies from meeting electronically. However, because of the COVID-19 public health emergency, Governor Lee issued Executive Order 16, which provides that governing bodies can meet electronically if the governing body determines that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 crisis. City Council, as you know, has been having electronic meetings, and they have made this finding at each of their meetings. What you as a governing body need to do at this point is make a determination that it is necessary for you to meet electronically rather than physically in person with a quorum. If the majority of you do not believe that it's necessary for you to meet electronically like this, then we would have to adjourn this meeting and move into a physical location. So, Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions about that?
Absolutely not. I assume what you're going to want is a roll call vote from
Yes,
Joe.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, a roll call vote would be appropriate.
Joe?
Okay, Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Mark Byington.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to do, obviously, this whole thing is going to be different than what we're used to. If anybody is watching this and they want to see a copy of the agenda, you can find it on our city webpage. You can go to bristoltn.org. There's a black bar up at the top. Click the words, click here. They're in red. They're going to bring up a screen that'll have a first responder on that. Below the first responder is a thing that says meeting and presentations. The 8th item down from that is Planning Commission. The last line in the narrative about the Planning Commission is agenda. Just click that and you'll be able to see a copy of the agenda if anybody wants to do that. The other thing that we will be doing, we're going to be asking the public to call in for comments. And the number to call in for the comments is 423-217-1510. If you're looking on the BTES channel, that number is scrolling. So if you have any, there's 2 places that we're going to have public comments. We're going to have unscheduled from the public, and then when we go to specific items, we will then ask people to discuss that. So if you have a comment that you want to make to the Planning Commission meeting tonight, go ahead and call that number. And then we'll have some time here in a minute to see if anybody wants to log in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to approve the minutes from the February 17th meeting. You have those in front of you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I need to know who made the motion.
Scott. Sorry.
Scott made the motion. Who made the second?
Second.
Yep.
Hey, hang on a minute, Kelly.
I'm with you.
Okay. Now, who made the motion?
Scott Gaynor.
And who seconded it?
Malin.
Thank you very much. You ready for roll call?
Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Statement is yes. Mark Byington,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Buck Gaynor,
Yes.
Kai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire Robin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next thing on the agenda is unscheduled comments from the public. As we said just a little while ago, there's a number that you can call into to address the Planning Commission on anything that is not on the agenda. Like I said, if it's on the agenda, you can address it at that point in time. So if anybody wants to address the Planning Commission, please make that phone call right now, 423-217-1510. Now, what we have to do is we have to wait a couple of minutes here to find out whether or not anybody wants to call in. So we're going to have some dead air here for a minute while anybody calls in. All right, everybody, we're back. Let the record show that nobody called in on the unscheduled portion of public comments. So the next thing on the agenda is old business. Tim, do we have any old business?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then we'll go to new business. And I do know that we have folks waiting to discuss this, but this is a special use permit application. So if there's anybody from the public that wants to discuss with the Planning Commission the special use permit application, now is the time to call in. And we'll park you in order and we'll go for it. So, Dan, who's taking this?
Mr. Chairman, for your all's consideration tonight is a special use permit application for 1649 King College Road by Mr. Chris Taylor. This would be for use of a sports club in a B1B zone. Mr. Taylor is proposing to build a sports club and center at that address. With that, I'll let Sheriff Young do the presentation for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. I'm going to run through some slides on this application. We do have Mr. Chris Taylor with us tonight, who is the applicant, and then Mr. John Ponish, who is the architect and engineer on this project. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Okay. All right. So as Mr. Beaver stated, the location here is 1649 King College Road. This involves 3 parcels of land. It's map 1, parcel 1010, 1020, and 1030, approximately 10 acres. And the zoning on these parcels is B1B, which is our neighborhood and office zone, and R3, which is a multifamily zone. The next slide shows the location map. The parcels that are highlighted in red are the parcels under consideration tonight. This may look a little familiar to you. The Planning Commission approved a subdivision plat for this just about 2.5 years ago. So this is 3 of the parcels of the 5 that were approved by the Planning Commission. The other 2 parcels have been sold to other owners, so we have the 3 parcels in red here tonight for Mr. Taylor's project. The next map shows the zoning of the property, and you'll see that these 3 parcels are split zoned. So you have 1B across the front of the property along King College Road, and then R3 in the rear of the properties adjacent to the residential area along Rock. So there is some split zoning here for this project. The next slide shows the property use and zoning adjacent to these parcels. To the north, R1A, low density residential. So you do have single family homes there for subdivision. To the south is R1A, low density single family residential. You have there the land use is single family residential, and then you do have the BTS substation across the street. To the east is zone B1B, so it's got the B1B zone and the R3 zone, vacant and residential. And then to the west, 1B3, also a single family residential use on the property to the west. Just quickly to recap why this is coming to you all as a special use application. This is a commercial zone along the frontage of King College Road. So it's B1B. The B1B district is to accommodate some light commercial and office uses that are located near residential areas. On the slide, you'll see a little bit of a summary of some of the permitted uses that would be allowed out there today. So if Mr. Taylor was going to do single family residential, if he was going to do some office use, some restaurant use, healthcare uses, those would be allowed today. So he would be, his process would be to go through the site plan application process and then the building permit process, but those would be permitted uses outright. So that's the list of uses that he can pursue right now with the Planning Commission review. The uses permitted, the very last line here on this slide, the uses permitted by a special use permit are the uses the same as in the RM district, including private golf, swimming, or tennis clubs and automobile sales. So the next slide shows you verbatim from the RM section what those uses permitted by special use permit are. And you'll see that final item is private golf, swimming, tennis, and similar sports clubs. So the reason for the Planning Commission review of this special use permit is because he is pursuing the use of a sports club. When the Planning Commission considers a special use permit application, the zoning ordinance sets forth criteria, a list of things that you are to use to review the application. And those items are listed here on the screen. So you've got ingress and egress, parking and loading areas, refuse, utilities, screening and buffering, signs and exterior lighting, maximum lot coverage, and then general compatibility with adjacent properties and property in the district. Those are your criteria for review tonight. The next slide shows drone footage of the parcel. So this shows the kind of the flat area of those 3 parcels that's predominantly got that B1 zoning on it. The next slide shows a street side view of the property. So there's that flat area along King College Road. And then the next slide, which this is included in your packet of material. I know it's hard to read on this screen, but this shows the concept that Mr. Taylor is considering. So he has a building, it's 18,000 square foot building is what's shown on this concept plan. And you can see the layout of the parking, the landscaping, and some of their drainage features on this concept plan. So I'm sure we'll flip back to the slide throughout the conversation, but I'll just quickly run through those special use permit criteria and how they apply to this application. So ingress, egress, and off-street parking, they're showing 2 entrances from King College Road. Staff has discussed the traffic impacts of this development and believe that they will be minimal to the existing roadway system. The total square foot of the building is 18,000 square feet, and the parking requirement for arts, entertainment, and recreation facilities is only 1 space per 2,500 square feet. So the proposed building really does not require much parking, only 8 spaces, but the conceptual site plan shows 118 spaces on the site, with 8 of those being handicap accessible. Next slide, the refuse area. There is a refuse area that's shown on the concept plan. It's at the northwest corner of the parking lot. When they come for their site plan application, they will have to show how that dumpster area will be appropriately screened, because our zoning ordinance does require screening. As far as utilities go, water and sanitary sewer service are available, and then screening and buffering. The zoning ordinance does require screening and buffering on residential uses. So the type landscape buffer that the zoning ordinance sets out, it's called the type B, medium to low buffer option. And that is something that acknowledged on the concept plan, not in great detail, but have acknowledged that will be required along those residential property lines. So here is a slide that shows what those options are, and you've all seen this a couple times when we looked at special use permit applications, but this is one of the areas that the Planning Commission can look at for the special use permit, but the landscaping is required through the site plan application process. And so we will be looking to see at a minimum that it meets all the landscaping chapter requirements. Let's see. Next is lighting and signage. As part of the site plan package, will require a photometric plan if any lighting is proposed, and that will have to conform with the city's lighting ordinance. Setbacks and maximum lot coverage. According to the B1B setback standards, the project does fall within the setbacks allowed in this district. So it meets all the front, side, and rear yard setbacks. Public notification. We did run a public notification ad on this project in the Bristol Herald Courier on April 1st, 2020. We did place public notification signs on the property, and adjacent property owners were notified by letter, and they were also sent a comment sheet to reply back to us with their either in favor or opposed to the project opinions. So we did receive several calls and several emails about this project. Several were just in the nature of, can you tell me what's going on? They were curious about the project. We received one of the adjacent property owner letters back that was in favor of this special use application, but we received two correspondences from people within the adjacent property area that were opposed to the project. One from the Bakers, their email was included in your packet. I received another one on Friday afternoon from someone else. And typically when we get these kind of late between the time when your packet goes out and the meeting, we print them out and give them to you at your meeting. So I'd be happy to read this one for you, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow it.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So this email is from Ann Rife, who lives on Robin Road, and she says, in her email, she says, thank you for providing me with the special use report packet for the permit to be discussed at the hearing on Monday. After looking over the materials, Brian Rife and I, as residents of the Forest Hill subdivision and adjoining property owners, have some concerns about the development of the Taylor properties. With respect to the site plan presented by Mr. Taylor for discussion, we want to ensure that there will not be any parking area placed for congregation behind the building site that cannot be easily viewed from King College Road for public safety purposes. 18,000 square feet of building can hide quite a bit of activity. Additionally, I note a second site on the plan marked as a future second access site. Is there a plan to build a road down the utility easement, and how far would that extend? Not sure of the scope of what will be addressed at the hearing on Monday, but we would object to a second access behind the planned building site. This would certainly negatively impact property values in the Forest Hills subdivision. Last, we ask that the city and Mr. Taylor remain mindful of the wooded area that surrounds the Forest Hills community. One of the adjoining property owners mentioned the natural habitats of several birds in the area and other wildlife. That is a concern of ours as well. There is also a concern regarding erosion. If Mr. Taylor's plans go further uphill from this gym building site, where there is a natural and effective rock barrier to erosion and mature forested area that serves the same function, we would object to the development of this side up the hill from the primary building site towards Forest Hills. Thank you for your time and information regarding the meeting on Monday. We will try to participate, though I am unsure of the efficacy of a public meeting that is limited by individual access to an online format and a device that enables access. So that is from Mrs. Rife, and she sent that in Monday. Objection letter we received is in your packet, and that is from the Bakers, who live at the property next door to this project. So with all of that update on public notification, I'll move to the staff recommendation. The staff has reviewed this application, and we find that it meets the regulations of the zoning ordinance, and recommend to the Planning Commission to approve the sports club use at 1649 King College Road.
Sheriff, thank you very much for that presentation. For the people that are tuning in, let me explain what our procedure is. We follow a kind of a modified Robert's Rules of Order in that we will have discussion with staff before there is a motion. So we'll have discussion, then we'll turn and ask the public to address anything. And then at that point in time, the Planning Commission may again ask questions of people that are calling in or of staff. Then at that point in time, we will look for a motion and a second. And if there is a motion and a second, we will then go forward with additional discussion on the motion that's on the floor. Then at the end of discussion, we'll have roll call. So we'll get this started. And the one thing that I would like Sheriff to address, because some people may not, who are tuning in for the first time, may not understand the difference in a rezoning and a public use or a special use permit. Would you be so kind as to explain the difference in the two, and then kind of again explain why the special use permit is needed?
Sure. So the rezoning application is going to, if we're pursuing a rezoning application, they would be absolutely changing the zoning designation on the property, and therefore the list of allowed uses and special use permitted uses for that particular zone. So they are not requesting a rezoning here. They are requesting consideration by the Planning Commission for a use it's already listed in the zoning designation. It's just deemed a special use because the Planning Commission has the ability to review a certain criteria of items, which are those ingress, egress, landscaping, all those items that were on that previous slide. But that allows the Planning Commission to give some special consideration to those items because it is a special use and not a permitted use. But again, with the B1B zone, you have many permitted uses already that are commercial in nature that would be allowed here right now, tomorrow, provided that they go through the proper site plan application and building permit. So the special use is allowing a little bit more review by the Planning Commission with regard to those certain criteria. If you have reason to think that there is a issue with any of that criteria, then you would be able to place particular conditions on the special use permit to ensure that criteria was met.
So far as an example, if somebody wanted to put a gas station in there, a convenience store in there, they could do that right now, and it would not come in front of the Planning Commission at all.
I didn't hear the second one. The gas station is a permitted use.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get out there. So that being said, let's turn it over to the Planning Commission to ask any questions of staff.
One of the questions I have, the special use permit would be for this only. So if they decided not to do this, do something else, the special use would be null and void and they couldn't do it unless it fell under the criteria of the zoning that's already there.
Right. So if, let's say this is approved or not, and Mr. Taylor sells the property and does not want to pursue this use, he could build a commercial strip center with any of the permitted uses on that list without Planning Commission review.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Please.
I noticed or heard in the objection, somebody was concerned about the right-of-way going up to Forest Hills from King College Road. I see on the site plan there is a right-of-way there. Who owns that right-of-way? Is that a city right-of-way or is that a private right-of-way?
Sheriff?
There's an existing, I'll answer that, Mr. Chairman. There's an existing BTES electrical easement up that side. There's not an active line currently along that property line, but there is an existing electric system easement there.
Could that easement be used for roadway, or I would hope not.
Well, it could with the electric system's permission, yes.
It could be made into a city street.
Well, I don't know the city. I mean, that's a long ways down and have to look at what the proposed use would be behind there, but it's a possibility if they wanted to subdivide, say, the property behind there and needed to put in a public road or a road to a public standard, that could be a possibility.
but at this point unlikely, correct?
That's not requested at this time by the
Okay.
applicant.
But they would have to have BTES's approval since they have the right of way, correct?
BTS would have to grant permission to put a road or a driveway across that easement, yes.
Also, just so if, I mean, that possibility exists whether this is approved or not, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Do I not remember that BTS had some high-powered lines going up that easement at one point in time that are no longer there?
That is correct.
All right. Any other questions at this time?
With regards to the letter where they were opposed, something happening to the pond, there's no plans for that pond to go away that I can see right now, is there?
Well, regards to drainage and water quality off the proposed site, they would have to meet our current regulations regarding stormwater runoff and water quality, since this site is over 1 acre, the proposed development. So they would have to work, and they have been working with our city engineer on water quality features as well as looking at potential detention for runoff.
Yeah, this is Scott. Along those lines, on the site plan on note 17, it's a bit of an eye chart, but it says it's a blue line subsidiary of Cedar Creek, but I don't see any kind of creek or water feature from the aerials or on the site. So what is that, subterranean? Is that just a ditch? What is that?
The blue line is USGS, basically drainage ways they have put on USGS maps. They call them little blue lines because they indicate drainage areas. That does not mean there is a stream there. It just means they consider that a drainage way. And if you've driven out on that property, I know from the slides it's hard to see, but driven by that property, you would see the drainage swell that goes through that property. So it does receive drainage. There is a small drainage area. This would be at the headwaters to that drainage area. It starts up about Edgefield Road, is about the crest of the hill right in there. So there is a small drainage area that drains down to the swell, and ultimately that drainage area makes its way down to Cedar Creek. But this would be just a drainage swell, and like I said, USGS sometimes places blue lines to indicate drainage areas.
So I do have a question about that. I mean, obviously you're taking that out. So how is that going to affect the cattail area, the swampy area there on the adjacent property? Is that going to make it worse? Is it going to dry it out? What's the expected result of this?
The water, when you look at runoff from developments, you cannot put water in a different form, peak flow or fashion across your downstream neighbor, or for that matter of fact, you can't dam it up and put a pond on your neighbor's property upstream of you.
Right.
So they'll have to discharge water from this site similar to the way it was discharging prior to the development.
Okay, so how's that going to happen?
Well, they've got a proposed, they'll have a water quality feature there, and they'll also have a retention pond.
Okay. I mean, it's just a little fuzzy. I mean, I know we're not looking at the water. Those are details we're not seeing, but it's definitely going to impact it. And I think that's one of the key things that the landowner adjacent was concerned about. And so I'd like us to have a better answer than, well, the developer's going to work on it.
Well, they have been working with the engineering division. They have not submitted the full site plan for approval yet. They will have to meet all our criteria for discharge of water from a development, regardless of the special use. If they were putting a development here, they would have to meet the same criteria that's in our drainage that anybody else would that put a development here. So really the drainage is the drainage and runoff from developments is what we review during the site plan review process for any development in the city, not just this one. So wherever development occurs, we always look at how drainage is going to impact adjacent properties.
So is
And
this,
that detail will come. I mean, that detail will come, and they'll have to meet our requirements in our design standards for drainage.
so this isn't the finalized site plan then? Or is it?
This is a more detailed concept of it. Yes. This is typically more detailed than you would get in standard special use permit process, because they have been very good in working with us very well. The architect / engineer, Mr. Ponish, has had multiple meetings and calls and conversations with us regarding the proposed development.
All right. I just got to say, I'm a little, I get a little concerned when we're doing a special use permit and we're being asked to judge on the site, and then the site plan isn't finalized. I mean, it's asking me to approve something that could change, and that's, anyway, that's just thoughts.
Hey Tim, this is Kai. Following up on Scott's point, let's say if this is finalized and there is some kind of water issue, I guess what steps can the adjacent property owners take to remediate some of these issues in case there is a water issue of some sort?
If they feel there's a water issue, they can always work with the city and the developer on those issues. I mean, there's several ways to do that available to adjacent property owners. And it really, regardless of the special use, any development's that way. So the special use is the main thing that we're trying on this one for people to understand, is the special use is for the sports club use. It could be, you saw the list of what all it could be: doctor's offices, restaurants. It could be several things that wouldn't come before planning commission to develop this property, since it's already zoned B1B. So the special use is just, can I put this sports facility in a building on this property? And all those, regardless of the special use or not, like I said, they'll have to meet our design standards for site plans on, if they're over an acre, certainly water quality. And besides water quality, even if it's under an acre, we always look at drainage and runoff and how it impacts upstream and downstream properties as part of the site plan review process.
So let me just ask another question. So this is the plan that I see today, and as you said, we're being asked to approve whether or not it could be a athletic facility. Well, what's to prevent the developer from coming back and saying, well, okay, you approved the athletic facility, but now I'm going to take up this whole property, as opposed to like half that they have right now? Not much, right?
Well, if they wanted to change substantially the concept of it, they would have to come back with a different concept plan for review with the special use.
Also, the property behind it is residential. Is that not correct?
The property to the top of the screen is residential. That's Forest Hills.
No, I'm talking about the Taylor property that's behind the proposed special use permit property. That is residential, and it could not have commercial on it.
Correct. The R3 part cannot have the commercial part on it, the building. Correct. Because it is split zoned.
And I remember the adjacent property when they built up that dam to the left of it to catch more water, and that's what he was pumping from to do the strawberries.
Strawberries.
And the state sees the cattails as protected property.
Crazy. All right. What other questions do we have for staff at this time?
Is there a,
Thing?
Just to reiterate what Tim said about the site, neither the site plan nor the waterway nor the water quality are specific to the use requested. They would be items that would have to be addressed no matter what was there, even if it's an already approved zoned issue.
Okay. Without any other questions for staff right now, what we will do is we will ask the folks that are part to address the Planning Commission. Then after we do that, then we'll come back and look for a motion unless there's other comments that we need to clarify because of the comment. So who do we have first?
All right, so I'm going to bring the individuals in one at a time. Just a note about how this process will work. If any of the Planning Commission members do have questions for the caller, I would ask that you ask all the questions of that given caller before we move to the next, because once we move to the next caller, the first caller will be disconnected from the meeting audio and there won't be a way to bring them back in. So just wanted to make that point. The first individual we have on the line is going to be Mr. and Mrs. Baker. So if you'll give me just one moment, I will bring them into the meeting audio.
Okay, do we have Mr. and Mrs. Baker online?
Yes.
Okay, what I need you to do, please, is to give us your name and address for the minutes.
It was Daniel Baker, 1625 King College Road, and my wife, Paris Baker.
All right. You have something about this you would like to say to the Planning Commission? Please go ahead.
Well, I am not in favor, as I think we have understood.
Right.
My concerns are mostly with the drainage, because, with, you're going to have this parking lot for 118 spaces. That's going to affect groundwater and things like that, wouldn't it?
Questions you have, particularly in those areas, we'll put with Mr. Beavers. He has addressed it, but it ain't going to hurt for him to readdress it.
Like mentioned before, we do have water quality and water runoff design standards for properties that are developed inside the corporate limits. And those would be addressed during the site plan review process to ensure they meet our current regulations for any development inside the city limits.
Whether it's a special use permit, right?
Whether it's a special use permit or just any development, be it subdivision or commercial or industrial, any development.
Yeah, right.
Okay, please go ahead.
Another concern I have is with what would happen to my property value. Personally, I wouldn't want to live next to a development of that sort, and I've got small children, dogs, wildlife, and whatnot. Anyway, I cannot see this not negatively affecting my property value to the point that I would be stuck here, because who would want to live next to that? So that's another one of my big concerns.
Okay.
And then there's the like Miss Wright mentioned, the wildlife that lives in these woods. I mean, anybody that drives through here in the morning could tell you there's 20 to 30 deer out here 4 or 5 times a week. We've got raccoons, coyotes I've seen. There's just an abundance of wildlife. We've got great blue herons in here, things of that sort. But mostly the two biggest for me would be my property value and the sheer amount of water that would run off of that, the parking lot and the facility itself. I mean, water drains downhill, and I am downhill. So I'm really more interested in what the water retention detention systems would be. I had talked to, I think his name was Evans. He was a realtor that was going to build. He was going to build row houses over there, and he had spoke to me about building a large berm and damming it up, and then it would slowly trickle into my property or something like that. Is that something that we can tell is a plan for that, or?
Tim, it sounds like he's describing a detention pond, but I'll let you address again water.
Yes, sir. Certainly, there are several options to address different types of water runoff, the mitigation of it. Detention pond is one method to do that. So there are several other ways to do that. But once again, when we look at the site plan and the design of it, we would be looking at the mitigation of that runoff onto adjacent properties.
Okay. Let me ask Planning Commission, does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask for a definition of a sports club?
Tim, what you got?
I'll defer that one to Sheriff. She's probably more familiar. I don't know that it's defined in any of our regulations specifically. Typically, sports clubs could be a gym. I know Mr. Taylor is proposing a volleyball sports club for younger people there and possibly older people, be indoor volleyball facility, but sports clubs could be 24/7 fitness. I mean, you just name what you would think of as a sports club. I think golf clubs, swim clubs. I mean, there's several different types of sports facilities.
It's not an eating establishment also?
Well, I think they could probably have that component. Eating establishments are by right allowed in the B1B zone.
What I was wondering about a sports club is a name for a a big restaurant that has lots of games and that kind of stuff. That's why I asked for a clarification.
You talking like a Dave and Buster's or something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sheriff, can you weigh in on that, please?
So, I mean, I think that within the event of a Dave and Buster's, I mean, we probably just have to take it case by case, but a Dave and Buster's would have a big restaurant component. They would have a big food component. And I think that they would probably, I mean, they might fall under restaurant and they might fall under sports club. I think that, I've thought a lot about why this is listed the way it is in the special use permit list. And I think that as I've thought about it, a sports club and how it impacts the residential area would be a lot like if it was tennis courts and they were outside, do they have lights? Are they going to have play at night? Are neighbors going to have to listen to, the whack of tennis rackets all day long? This one is indoors. So you're not going to have extra light or an extra, or again, back to that criteria of what the planning commission looks like. You're not going to have some of those concerns at play from this, and I understand the neighbors' concerns, but from the special use permit thought, you're not going to have some of those noise, light concerns. But I think we would probably go to, like we always do, is go to those NAICS codes and try to filter out exactly what the use is. And in this case, there's not a use that it falls under other than that sports club.
Like a Dave and Buster's Mart probably would fall under food services and drinking places limited to full service restaurants. So that's where I think and once again, Sheriff's right, we'd have to look at the next code to be sure. But I think that's where it would fall, and those are allowed by right in a B1B. They don't require any planning commission input on this property.
Okay, will all activities of this sports club be held inside a building?
As shown on the plan that you have before you, yes.
Well, what is this sports club? I mean, what are we talking here? A gym? What?
It's a gym that for volleyball, used for volleyball. And it could be other things but it's an indoor facility to accommodate like basketball, volleyball, stuff like that. What Mr. Taylor had shown and proposed. And
okay, so generic gymnasium then.
Correct.
And
I just see to the right of the middle parking lot an open space there. I didn't know if activities would be conducted outside in that area. And another question I have, what kind of design standards or materials are we talking about this building being built out of? I mean, we're not talking about a 2-story metal building, are we?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the way to address some of Mark's would be after the public has had their input to ask those questions to the developer and his architect engineer. That would probably be most helpful there to not keep the public on hold waiting.
All right.
Tim, I have one question. With regards to Mr. Baker's concerns of the water runoff, I know we have mitigation plans. Is there an assurance that we could tell him or give him that he should not have that concern, that it should be taken care of?
Well, certainly currently we regulate the 2 and 10-year events in our just normal runoff. So the peak flow from a 2 and 10-year storm should not be different than the peak flow prior to development. So they have to be equal or less for the 2 and 10-year storm. We do not regulate the 100-year event currently, except in floodplains. We look at the development in flood zones, but we do not require detention of anything more than the 2 and 10-year event. And those are your most frequent storm events. So that's what we look at is peak flow from a development. When it crosses that property line, that peak flow is as is currently or less than it is currently into the downstream properties. And it also has to cross the property line in a similar fashion. So I can't concentrate it all at one point. If it's currently spread out over 10-foot wide area, I can't neck it down to be 1 foot wide of flow or 2 foot. So I've got 2 criteria when we look at drainage for the 2 and 10-year storm is to look at 1, the peak flow, and 2, how does that flow mimic what's going across the property line currently. And on top of that, we have the water quality standards for the 1-inch rainfall. It's really a different number. I think it's 1.04 inches or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. That they'll have to run through. That's your first flush of pollutants coming off parking lots and buildings. And they will have to design a water quality feature that removes 80% of the total suspended solids from that runoff. And that typically pollution attaches to those suspended solids for downstream purposes. So that is our, in a nutshell, criteria for water quality, and without getting way too technical on it.
All right, let's do this.
Did that help, Mr. Baker?
A little. I wish I could see, the actual plan for what it would be, but I understand the regulations and things have to be met. I just, as far as the water's concerned,
when it comes to our property value, we are in a situation where we do have small children. This isn't a sort of facility that we would want to live next door to. That's a lot of people coming and going.
And an eyesore.
And a massive eyesore. And for me, it jeopardizes the quality of safety that I can provide to my kids with that many people right there beside my house. So I wouldn't want to live next to this. What's going to happen to my property value being next door to something so terrible that I'm not going to be able to sell my house to move away from it?
Property values is something that always comes up when people are addressing the Planning Commission, and it's not something we can address. Property values are always a guess. A lot of times people will worry that development's going to hurt it, but actually it helps it. And we do not address that. When you bought this property, the property next door was zoned B1, and so the potential was always there. So the potential value change is not something the Planning Commission is going to address.
Right. So when we bought this property, the rest of the property next to us was also sectioned out as a subdivision, which is what we were told was going to be going in there by Mark Harkle Road when we bought the property, which was fine. We understood that, expected housing to be next door. Either way, I understand that it's zoned what it's zoned, but we didn't even know what the house was zoned as until last year when we bought chickens, and I called, I guess, the zoning board to find out what our zone was to make sure I could have chickens. So
I understand. And here's what we're going to do is do you have any other comments that you want to make to the Planning Commission at this time? If not, is there anybody on the Planning Commission that's like to ask them another question? Okay. Hearing and seeing nothing either way, we want to thank you very much for calling in and participating in this. This is a very novel situation for us, and we appreciate you helping us get through this. So we will go to the next person that's queued up. What we got?
Okay, this is John. The next caller we have on the line is going to be Mr. and Mrs. Rife that I'm going to be bringing into the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. and Mrs. Rife here with us.
Hello, folks. You are speaking with the Planning Commission tonight. The first thing we need you to do is to give us your name and address, which will become part of the minutes.
Hi, my name is Ann Rife, and my husband is here, Brian Rife, And we are at 300 Robin Road.
Robin Road, and that, of course, is in the subdivision behind the subject property. All right, what we do is we're going to let you address us, anything you want to address, and then we're going to turn to planning commission members, and they will then ask you questions. So tell us what you got to say, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Okay, thank you, sir, for allowing us to participate by phone. I first want to mention that we've been attending this meeting since prior to 6 p.m. through YouTube Live, and we've been able to hear maybe 20% of what was said during the meeting. We do not have access to the BTS broadcast, so this was our only option for participation. And under the zoning ordinance, chapter 2, section 217, it states that a public hearing shall be held for any special permit application where any party may appear in person. And I understand COVID-19 accommodations, but I do not believe a hearing where only 20% of what is said can be received by the public could be considered a public hearing. And therefore, we would respectfully request that this issue, particularly since it's contested, be tabled at this time until a public hearing can occur. Additionally, I'd like to point out that on the original notice that was provided, and also in the report to the Planning Commission that was was provided to me through a FOIA request, that it indicates that there are 4 parcels implicated in the special use permit application, including parcel 10.40. That parcel is not owned by Chris Taylor. It's owned by another family. So that notice that was provided for the public hearing was incorrect and led to quite a bit of confusion for us as we were preparing for comment. So again, we would respectfully ask that this issue be tabled for a public hearing.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to say or request at this point in time before planning commission members discuss this with you?
Yes, we would also, if the planning commission decides to move forward with this, we would ask that the special use permit, if it's allowed, be very limited to the site plan that's proposed by Mr. Taylor and not be extended into the R3 area behind it. And the wooded hillside be left intact. And we also ask that safety considerations be made in terms of any parking or areas for congregation behind the 18,000 square foot building proposed.
All right, thank you for that. Planning commission members, do you have any questions or comments at this time? Nobody has any questions?
Yeah, I do. So can staff address the discrepancy in the parcels? I actually noticed that and forgot it.
Gareth, you gonna address that?
Yeah, I'll have to look back. To be honest with you, I don't have the I guess you're referring to the ad, or are you referring to the staff report?
Well, I can tell you, it's on the cover sheet of the tax ID. It says 4 parcels, and we're showing 3. So that's a bit confusing.
Yeah, I understand that, and I apologize. That one's my mistake. And it's just a mistake, but it should just be the 3 parcel numbers listed. So that shouldn't, all that is shown on the concept plan is all that's involved in this application. So on the staff report, I apologize. That's me.
Okay, so it's just point 1, point 2, and point 3 then, right?
Just the 3
parts. Yes. Point 4 is not involved.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's just an error.
Any other questions at this time? All right, we'd like to thank you for participating tonight, and we will now go to the next participant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that is the extent of callers that we have on the line. We do not have any additional callers in queue at this time.
Thank you very much. Do we have some participants by way of Zoom, though?
I will defer to our IT folks to see if they have got anyone queued up as an attendee there.
You have the developer, Chris Taylor, is online, Mr. Chairman, and the architect, engineer, John Ponish, is on the Zoom, and they're available for your all's questions.
Okay, now, as I understand it, this is a little bit different than picking on it on the phone. We can actually go back and forth and ask questions of each participant because they'll be on Zoom with us. Is that correct?
Correct. They are online, and you can see them. I mean, if you have depending on your device, but they're online and y'all can converse back and forth. Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll follow the same procedure. If either one of you guys want to say anything, particularly given some of the things that you've heard, please address that, and then we'll open it up to Planning Commission members to go back and forth.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Chris Taylor. Thank you all for having us be part of this tonight. A lot of speculation about what a gym is, what we're trying to do. There are several travel leagues and clubs in the basketball and volleyball arenas in this area. And my focus is to grow and develop a place for our youth to have a home base. That's the goal. No Dave and Buster's. The gym part is for our youth, to develop our youth and have a home base for these sports.
Chris, does this have any way or any affiliation or would be tied to anything that King College is doing?
I've spoken with Ryan Boer. He's the volleyball coach for both the men's and women's, and he has expressed some potential interest in this area for possibly practicing and or maybe tournaments. King just hosted top-ranked Alaska last year, and it was an exciting event. So yeah, I would like to potentially align in the future with King.
Chris, is the configuration of this facility going to be volleyball only? Is there any way to use it for other sports?
No, sir. It'll be multifaceted with basketball too. So basketball and volleyball, possibly some weights, but again, centralized around the youth.
So I've got a question for the number of parking places exceeds what's required by us. So what have you calculated parking spaces on for determining how many y'all want to have?
It depends. A club could average anywhere between 80 and 120. So if one club is going to practice from 10 years up, you could have everyone in there training the same times or the same nights or days. So yeah, I'm thinking that.
So you could anticipate a lot of traffic, vehicles coming in and out?
No more than the parking spots, I guess. King College has more traffic than Virginia Avenue. So they're both heavily trafficked areas throughout the day and night.
Chris, this is going to be just kind of like FC Dallas soccer, where you've got younger up to the college levels
Yes, sir.
that'll be practicing and then
Yes, sir.
games and
And like Tim alluded earlier, it could be for the adults too. There's limited spaces for basketball clubs or pickup games. So yeah, I'm trying to focus on that as well. But the core of my strategy would be the youth and to have a place that they can call their home to practice. There's limited places in the area for them to practice.
Mr. Taylor, this is Takai. So is it anticipated that this facility would be up and running year round?
Yes.
All right.
What other questions do we have?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark. Do we still not know how this is going to be constructed? What materials does that play in here?
Let's go ahead and get John Ponish in here since he's the architect engineer. And John, if you would address that.
Okay, I think the question, am I clear to everybody?
Yes.
I think the question is regarding the building. What I want to do is reference the ordinance. The ordinance is in chapter 4. Business section 408 plan development area overlay subsection 4 specifically this and the concerns that you all outlined for materials exterior. You're very clear, and the city has pointed that out from the beginning. And from everything Mr. Taylor and I have discussed.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm getting like every third word there.
And getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, John, do you have some sort of speaker on or something that's causing feedback?
He just muted.
Okay, well, now let's do this, and let's ask Chris this. Chris, if you'd go ahead and take it up as to what type of construction you're going to have on the building, et cetera, please.
Yeah, we're looking
Y'all
at.
still hear me?
Chris is answering right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding the components of the building, it would be a mixture of steel, block, and glass. We want to make it an aesthetically sound building structure versus just a straight metal building, as someone had mentioned earlier.
Chris, if you don't mind, I made a mistake when I asked you to come on. I forgot to get your name and address for the record. Would you?
I'm sorry.
That's my fault.
Chris Taylor, 324 Leslie Court, Bristol, Tennessee.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, we have our regs right now, the current design standards for B1B that limits, you cannot use rib metal siding, plain block, unpainted block. Sheriff, what's the other couple there?
Can't do unpainted concrete block, cinder block, or single sheet corrugated metal.
So they would have to meet those building material requirements under our current regs.
All right. Any other questions at this time?
So I'll just, I think the concern about the malfunctioning of our TV channel is legit for concern that that public have not been able to follow as well as we would hope that they would. So I would like to think about tabling this and seeing if we can have, if we're going to do another call, that we get a better reception at that point to cover the issue at that time. So that's out for discussion. I'm not making a motion yet.
Okay, there's a discussion from one of the planning commission members. I'm going to turn to our legal counsel and ask if we have a legitimate meeting here, even though that there was some issue with the YouTube. And I don't think that there's an issue on the BTES channel. I think it was only YouTube that they made reference to.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's a matter of not having a legitimate meeting. I think the issue is that maybe the public hearing has not happened the way it should have, because if we've got people who were not able to hear other people's comments and hear the planning commission's questions and discussion, then that raises some problems for the public hearing itself, even if the meeting itself is compliant with the Open Meetings Act as the governor's order has allowed it. So I would share Mayor Firearman's concerns here.
Well, all right.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin, to that end, I would move that we table this issue until we can have a public in-person meeting.
And I'll second it.
But wouldn't that mean everything on the agenda, not just the one item on the agenda? Danielle?
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Byington, because the other items on the agenda are not public hearings. I don't believe there's anything else that requires a public hearing tonight. It's just the regular meeting, which is required to be open to the public. So the public is required to be able to view it, but it does not have to have public participation the way that a public hearing does.
There is a motion on the table, on the table to table this. Give me that motion again. Was that the rest of the meeting or just merely this public hearing?
That was merely this public hearing.
All right.
This issue.
All right. So we're open to discussion because we have a motion and we have a second. We have a motion on the table. So let's discuss it. What do you guys want to do?
I feel like that since it was brought up as an issue, we did have some errors, and probably should table it for now.
Has anyone verified that the audio on the YouTube is not working?
Yeah, I think everything was fine on the BTN. It was on YouTube, but as the lady, I guess, presented, I guess we're incumbent to follow those guidelines pretty strictly and make sure that everyone is and has access to the meeting. And apparently, because her issue of not having BTS out there, then that's probably legitimate.
Well, I'm just asking, has anybody of our IT people verified that the YouTube channel isn't working properly?
Yes.
No, we're seeing audio. I'm sorry, come back on that.
YouTube seems to be working.
It's one of those things I would like to have a playback on it, but I don't guess that's going to work. How y'all want to handle this? Any discussion? You want me to call for the motion?
I'm just going to say this, Scott. I'm just going to say I don't know how we could say that just this one and not everything. I understand the legal side, but if you're saying people can't hear it, then there's really not much point. And if our IT folks are saying that the YouTube feed is working, then I don't know.
I kind of agree with Scott.
Meaning?
If we can't do this one, how can we do the rest of them?
Okay. All right. We've got a motion and a second on the table to table this public hearing about the special use permit. Is there any other discussion on the motion that's on the table? Okay, I'm going to call for a roll call. And if you vote yes, you're voting to table the meeting, this portion of the meeting. And if you vote no, then you're voting to press on tonight. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Alan Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Mark Byington,
No.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
No.
Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire Robin.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This portion of tonight's planning commission meeting has been tabled. What we will then do is we will look at our agenda and go to the next item on the agenda. There it is. The next item on the agenda is subdivision regulations waiver request. Before we get started, is there a motion?
Well, I'm confused now. Are we not having public comments or public input? Because,
You're talking about on item B?
well, I guess B, C, and D, right?
All right, what I was just calling for is I was going to see if anybody was going to make a motion that we table the rest of the meeting, and not hearing one, we're going to press on with B, C, and D. Because there's been no motion on those. Motion? None? All right, staff. New business B.
Mr. Chairman, while y'all start, I'm going to disappear for a minute. I need to make a phone call, so I apologize. I'll come back in just a minute.
Thanks, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for your consideration, the next item is a waiver request for, let me get to the right slide here, sorry. Click through that. Actually, your next item in the slideshow, and I don't know, Sheriff, what happened here, and I'm sorry, I'll probably clicked through the slideshow wrong.
If you want to take them out of order, please do.
Oh, here we go. So I just hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Next item for consideration is a subdivision waiver request for replat of the Roger Colvin Jr. property. And the waiver would be currently our subdivision requirements are a 50-foot road frontage when you're subdividing a lot, a minimum of 50-foot road frontage. This property, they're wanting to subdivide it into 3 lots and would not meet that required road frontage. And with that, I'll let Sheriff Young start the conversation and discussion.
Thank you all. Again, as Mr. Beaver said, Roger Colvin Jr. is the applicant here with this waiver request. The address is 1561 Bristol Caverns Highway. The property is zoned, it's the Sullivan County A1 zoning, and the request is for a lot frontage waiver request from the City of Bristol subdivision regulations. So the next slide shows a location of this property. So you all, well, some of you will recognize the track there on Bristol Caverns Highway. The parcel here is outlined in red, and I'll show you closer, a little bit more detail in just a minute, but there are 3 homes currently located on this parcel. The next map shows the zoning in the area, so you'll see that the predominant zoning here is A1. That green color is the A1 zone, and that's Sullivan County zone. The next slide shows the plat, and I know this one's hard to see, but you have a copy that's in your in your packet of materials. But the plat request is to subdivide into 3 parcels. So each of the structures on the property would have their own lot, and that's important to them for a lot of reasons. But the desire is to have each home on its own parcel. If you skip to the next slide, Tim, here you can see the parcels outlined in blue, and each of the homes are outlined in red. And here's where we get into a little bit of a mismatch. So the Sullivan County zoning ordinance allows for, and this is what I'll read is what is in red. So it says all lots 2 acres or less in total area shall have a minimum of 25 feet of street frontage abutting on a public street. So this property, as it is right now, has 132 feet of road frontage. So they can subdivide it and meet the Sullivan County zoning regulations. If you'll flip to the next slide, Tim, please. This is the same image, but it's going to have an excerpt of the City of Bristol subdivision regulations. So if you look down in red, this is going to say that the minimum lot frontage on a public way in the City of Bristol be 50 feet. So there is a bit of a mismatch between what the Sullivan County zoning ordinance allows or the zoning resolution allows and what the City of Bristol subdivision regulations require. And in case I didn't say it at the start, the reason that this is coming to you all is that this property is within the city's urban boundary. So the plat has to be processed through the City of Bristol. Amber Torbett, the planning director with Sullivan County, has reviewed this request, and she does recommend that there be a waiver be granted to allow to subdivide into the 3 lots. Her zoning resolution requires and allows only 1 primary structure on a parcel of land. So this will correct a nonconformity for the Sullivan County zoning resolution. The slide that's up right now, this lays out the criteria for the Planning Commission granting a waiver from the regulations included in the document. So it talks about you grant a waiver if there are extraordinary hardships or practical difficulties that would result from strict compliance with the regulations. So 1 through 5, and I won't read them. I know you all have looked at them quite a few times before, but this sets out the criteria for granting a waiver. The planning staff, City of Bristol planning staff, we've reviewed this request. We don't find that the request meets the criteria listed above. We can support a 2-lot subdivision, but we don't recommend or can't recommend deviation from the road frontage requirement to allow a 3-lot division based on these items. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know we have Mr. Robert Colvin and his niece on the Zoom call with us, I believe. So I know they can answer some more questions about the situation and what their issues are.
All right, we'll bring them on in 1 minute. Any questions we have of staff, please?
Yeah, this is Scott. So how are we defining road frontage on Bristol Caverns Highway or that access road to the back lot? That's where I'm confused with.
So that would be along Bristol Caverns Highway.
So how does being 2 okay but not 3? Because it seems to me they're all going to use that same access road, yes?
Yes, but they would address that through an easement. So that's not a road that's to any standard where we would accept it as road frontage. It would just be the driveways for the individual homes. Did that answer your question?
No, I guess I'm still confused because the road frontage is still going to be the same, right? I mean, that 1 lot is going to have it, and then there's going to be an easement for the 2 behind it. So no, Kevin's shaking his head. So where am I missing here?
You're going to have 3 separate lots.
Right. So if you go back to the plat, Tim, if you don't mind scrolling back to, so if you look down, kind of at the road frontage here, what they're proposing to do is split this into 3 lots, 2 of which would have 25 feet, and the third lot would have the remainder. I think it's 86.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking at, okay, so it's 2 flag lots and then another one in the front, right? That's what we're saying.
Correct. And the zoning,
Okay.
the
Got
zoning
it.
in Sullivan County allows that so long as the lots aren't more than 2 acres.
Okay.
But the city subdivision regulations don't have an exception for that.
Okay. All right. I got it now. All those lines running together got me confused. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Typically in this situation, we encourage people to look at adjacent properties to see if there's any way to purchase property to meet the regulations. But if you go back to that aerial image, Tim, 2 slides forward maybe, you'll see there's not a lot of, the lots on either side don't really have any frontage to give themselves. They're sitting at those minimum standards as well.
As we speak, you got 3 houses on 1 lot?
Correct.
Right.
And the two were built in right around 1970, and then there is and I think Mr. Colvin can probably provide exact dates, but 2 were built some years ago, and then the home closest to Bristol Caverns Highway it came in the 90s. So 2 of those predate Sullivan County zoning ordinance. So that kind of explains how this situation has come to be.
Yeah. And then that property to the left has a real small frontage too, correct?
It does. Both properties on either side do. So the option to obtain some frontage to meet the requirements from the neighbors is not there.
Dr. Webb, I'm curious about something.
Yes, sir.
In your position as chairman of the Sullivan County Planning Commission, if this was up to that commission, how do you think it would be handled? Your opinion?
I think the way that it's hard for me to say the whole planning commission, but I can grant the waiver. I mean, these are spots in the county that are all over the place. You have acreage like this where the original house was developed on the road, and then a relative builds behind another relative, and then it comes down to the fact they want to subdivide all these lots up for tax reasons and for insurance reasons. And it's unfortunately, it's something that it's got to be faced and looked at and taken care of.
Have you all had this situation presented to you before on something that wasn't in our growth area?
I cannot recall.
Okay.
For sure. But my opinion says grant the waiver because the access will stay the same. It's purely for, other reasons that this has to occur.
All right, other discussion. Kevin, I can see you.
I'm sorry. We have no reason to assume that these lots will all stay in the same family, and that they may not change. We don't know that they might not change hands, in which case you could end up with a derelict lot with not enough frontage for viability. And I assume that is the reason for 50-foot minimum standard. Have.
I would have to agree with that as well.
So what you guys are lobbying for is to grant it because you just think that'd be beneficial to the landowners and just the way it'll go down. Is that what you're saying?
I cannot see 150 feet of unused property just to put 3 driveways in.
Okay. Is there, before we bring in the folks that have petitioned us for this, is there any other discussion with Planning Commission and staff at this time? All right, hearing and seeing none. Looking at my list of participants, we have the Cloyds on here, as I understand. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, if you would be so kind as to bring them in.
I reckon we're here.
There you go.
Can you hear us?
Yes, first thing we need you to do, please,
Yes.
is give us your name and address for the record for the minutes.
Okay, my name is Brandy Cloyd. My address is 1655 Bristol Caverns Highway, Bristol, Tennessee, 37620.
My name is Roger Colvin Jr. I live at 1651 Bristol Caverns Highway, same zip, everything, 376.
And then also we have 1649, also Bristol Caverns Highway up front.
Very good. I'm going to turn to the Planning Commission and ask if you all have questions of them, please.
We don't have any. I don't. Oh,
It's all right. It's all right. Anybody in the Planning Commission that would like to ask them any questions?
I can explain the reason we did this if you want.
Please.
I have 3 nieces, and I'm going to leave a piece to each one of them.
So you're the current owner of the entire
Yes.
tract?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I spent 22 years in the Navy. I bought this when I joined the Navy. And after I retired, we came home, and now I want to give it to the girls so that they can have their thing. It's a family owned, you know, by all of us, bought so that we could all live close together like that.
All right. Are there any questions from Planning Commission?
None from me. This is Scott.
All right. Then that being said, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission and we'll look for a motion.
This is Scott Gaynor. I make the motion that we approve the lot frontage waiver request.
This is Mark Webb. I second that.
All right. Joel, did you get the maker of the motion and the second?
Yes, sir, I did. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion on the floor that has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
This is Scott. I just don't see any way to rectify it other than just say it's going to be one property and you got 3 houses and yeah, I think what Dr. Webb said was correct is there's going to be places like this and really the only solution is to make these lots with small front.
Okay, the motion is on the table. If you're voting yes, you're voting to give the waiver, which is opposite of what our planning staff said. So that is the motion that's on the table. Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Mark Byington.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
No.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire-Robin,
I apologize. I'm going to abstain since I missed a good bit of the discussion, et cetera. So I abstain.
okay, motion passes, sir.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate you all coming in and talking to us by way of Zoom. And I hope
Yes,
this all
sir.
works out well for you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you. What's up next? Concept plan, Bluntful Eye Care, Highway 394.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is a approval of a concept plan for Bluntville Family Eye Care. The applicant is Stephen Hutton. This is located at 2554 Highway 394. Y'all saw this property under a special use request for multifamily residential several months ago, but with that, I will let Sheriff Young give the presentation.
Okay. So, as Mr. Beaver said, you all saw this as a special use permit application several months ago, and the reason for that was because of the multifamily component that it had. They also showed a commercial area along Highway 394, but that wasn't subject to the special use permit. The multifamily was. We're here tonight to talk about a concept plan for the commercial portion, which is their phase one of the project, because the Highway 394 overlay requires the submission of a concept plan for approval by the Planning Commission before they submit the full site plan application package. So that's the reason we're talking about this tonight. What they're proposing to do is add a 7,000 square foot doctor's office eye clinic that's located at 2554 Highway 394, and it's situated in a B3 General Business District zone. And I apologize, but I got a little flashing message that said move closer to the.
Yes, I think she's having some wireless troubles right now, but I can go ahead until she chimes back in. This slide you see is the lot where the development will be located. It will be on the Highway 394 side, which would be the top part of the screen. And to the back, you see Feathers Chapel Road, but the development itself, when we get to the site plan part, will be toward the Highway 394 corridor, front on that corridor. This slide here, it shows that it is in a B3 zone. That is, does accommodate the eye clinic by right. Once again, as Sheriff mentioned, this is coming before you as a concept plan because of the Highway 394 overlay district. The next slide shows the concept plan. You will see the eye clinics on the bottom, the darker gray, and excuse me as I look over to another TV to look at the slide. But it's the darker gray toward the bottom. That's the proposed eye clinic, and then there are some proposed phase 2 and phase 3 buildings that might go up in this strip center. You can see the entrance there off of Highway 394, and you did receive in your packets an access easement study, or an access entrance study, showing that this location, even though it doesn't meet the 550-foot requirement of our zoning regulations, there is a provision to let it have entrances closer than the 550-foot spacing if a traffic study does show that the impacts to that will still be safe to have that entrance at that location. And that study that you have in your packets goes through all that, and our traffic engineer, David Metzger, has looked at the proposal, and I've looked at it also, the study, and it does meet all criteria to be a safe entrance there. The next slide is the elevations shown for the building proposed. You can see it's a combination. Once again, in this overlay, you have the rib siding, plain cinder block, unpainted walls type as the previous item we had discussed, the special use permit. But this is the elevation views of it, and they do have some stone and some different types of siding there. We do have the architect is online, Steve Hutton, that can answer any questions about building materials. He is part of this Zoom meeting. Next slide's an aerial view showing the site. You can see the graded area. That's the one existing entrance. This site's to the right of that on your screen. And the entrance to this site will be all the way toward the right of your screen. It's about 450 plus minus feet to between the entrances. Next slide.
So that will not go away.
Do what?
The entrance we saw on the screen doesn't go away.
Correct. That's all in your traffic study. You can see there were 3 proposed entrances for the 3 different parcels on this side.
All right.
Traffic study. And basically what the traffic study it said would be to put for this parcel, and I can go back on this parcel, to put the entrance to the on this page would be onto the bottom side as far as possible from the other entrance, the one that you see in this slide right there. So that's what they did, and that's what the traffic study evaluated. This is just looking from the road right now. You can't really tell much. It's a grass lot, obviously level, sort of semi-level lot that's been graded out. Concept plan review. Once again, we talked a lot about the access point already. It is off of Highway 394, and you do have that traffic impact study. The zoning is B3, general business. You see the setbacks there. Properties are vacant around it except across Feathers Chapel Road to the south, and that will be your residential property back there. There's single family residential across Feathers Chapel Road. We would look at, as with any site plan, screening requirements based on the adjacent uses to properties. Landscaping, that will have to be, when they submit a site plan, we'll have to meet our landscape requirements. Same with the parking. We do have lighting regulations for external lights, signage. Once again, they'll have to meet our sign regulations, and all these will be evaluated during the site plan process to make sure they meet our current regulations. Refuse area that is required to be a screened refuse collection area, and it is shown on the site plan in the southwest corner. The actual screening detail will be provided at the time of the site plan submission. Staff has evaluated this, the various divisions and departments, and we do recommend that the Planning Commission approve the conceptual site plan because it does comply with our current overlay district regulations. And once again, if the public comment, if we can get the IT to let on Steve Hutton, if he's still with us, he can answer any specific questions about the development.
All right.
We'll try to answer them.
What we'll do is, before we go to Steve, let's bring Planning Commission on to ask any questions of staff first. Then we'll bring Steve on and we can ask questions of Steve Hutton. Does Planning Commission have any questions? All right, then let's see if we can bring Steve Hutton on, and let's see if we have any questions for Steve.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. If
Okay.
you would, please give us your name and address for the minutes.
My name is Steve Hutton. My office address is 245 East New Street in Kingsport, 37660. You want home address, or is that good enough?
No, that's good enough. That's
okay.
That's good enough. Is there anything that you want to say before you are asking any questions, or you just want Planning Commission to ask questions?
No, you can just ask questions. I think Tim and his staff have looked at this several times, so I think we've, as far as I know, we've done everything to comply with everything we're supposed to have done. So just ask questions, and I'll try my best to answer.
Thank you. Planning Commission.
No questions from me.
None for me.
None for me.
All right. Kevin? Kevin Buck, you don't have a conflict on this, do you?
I don't think so.
All right.
Our company owned the property, but we do not anymore.
You do not have a conflict. All right. I'd love to hear a motion.
I'll make a motion to follow staff's recommendation. This is Mark.
All right. Mark Byington made a motion. Is there a second?
Second, from Malin.
Malin made the second. Is there any discussion for the motion that's on the floor? If you're voting yes, you're voting to accept staff's recommendation, which will allow this development to happen. Any questions about what the motion is? Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Mark Byington,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Motion passes, sir.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. We very much appreciate you.
Kelly, I keep expecting to hear John Ward though every time you come up.
Oh God, I wish I had his voice and
Well,
do
you
it.
look a little bit like him maybe in his younger days. So. See ya. Bye.
Thank you. All right, other new business. Sullivan County text amendment recommendation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up next for your consideration is an amendment to the Sullivan County zoning ordinance regarding building permits. With that, I believe Sheriff is back and in a different scene, but back with us, and she can give the presentation.
Great backdrop, Sheriff. Yours is the best.
I know. I'm so sorry, everyone. I don't know what happened in my kitchen, but Tim, I might, if you don't mind to take this, I might have somebody about to get loud. If y'all don't mind. This is a really pretty straight.
I'll take care of it, Sheriff. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward text amendment. It's to the building permit fees for Sullivan County. Once Sullivan County, their zoning regulations are inside, as we saw during the waiver request for the subdivision you previously heard. They do have property that's in the county, but not inside the city limits because you are a regional planning commission. So there are some overlaps, Sullivan County inside your planning boundary, vice versa with Kingsport. So when Sullivan County makes zoning amendments, they have to request that the planning commissions from Kingsport and Bristol make recommendations on any text amendments to Sullivan County zoning regulations. Well, I probably just said all that. I'll just reading down the slide. So Sullivan County Planning Commission reviewed this and gave unanimous positive recommendation on March 18th. And thus, based on that, it came to Bristol and Kingsport will consider the proposal also. Proposed amendments, you can see the highlights there. In general, it basically says that first one there, part 2 up top, the 12-102.6, that it calls for contractors to request inspections from Sullivan County. So the contractor needs to go to the building department and request the required inspections for landowner. The second 2 bullet points are they are raising their fees, and you can read the various parts there. Building zoning permit renewal for principal structures, $58 fee. Residential accessory structure renewal fee, $28. Swimming pool fee, flat rate, $58. And they have their building permit fees inside their zoning ordinance. Bristol, we do not have our building permit fees inside the zoning ordinance. So that is why they have to make amendments to their zoning ordinance if they change their fee schedule for permits. And this is general, they'll just basically add that sentence. It is the responsibility of the permit applicant, land owner, general contractor, or agent to call for timely inspection. And then they have this table, this is the table that will change. And the highlighted yellow are the changes in the sections, and basically reiterates what was on the previous slide. We have reviewed the amendments to the zoning regulations. This does not impact the city in any way. It is truly a fee and permitting process for the county. We do recommend that the Bristol Regional Planning Commission make a favorable recommendation for this text amendment. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Staff, or excuse me, council, go ahead. Planning Commission, go ahead.
I move to approve the recommendations.
This is Kevin. I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any comments? Also, I assume we didn't have anybody calling in that wanted to address it.
No, Mr. Chairman, we do not.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve this for Sullivan County. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Balin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Mark Byington,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire Robin.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Unanimous, sir.
Thank you. That brings us almost to the end of our agenda. Other matters, Mr. Beaver, City Council update.
Yeah, it's just a quick update from City Council. At their April 7th meeting, they passed on second reading 3 items that have been, and Planning Commission have discussed these items. One is electronic message boards for government facilities. They did approve that on second reading, and all these 3 items would become effective on April 24th. But the electronic message board for government facilities, in general, government facilities in any zone can have electronic message boards. And this was talking about schools, any fire stations, any of our facilities. The biggest caveat in that is it must be a 2-acre or larger site, and there are limits on, as you all remember, on brightness and size of the electronic message board. Also, on second reading, they passed the zoning for the Boyd property, the annexation at 1003 Highway 126. They passed B3 as the zoning for that newly annexed property. And finally, it's not a zoning ordinance, but they did, you all were involved, but on billboards, they did pass the electronic billboard provisions that any billboard can be electronic in the corporate limits, and that there shall be no new billboards inside the corporate limits. So that all occurred at the April 7th City Council meeting.
Thank you very much.
And one other thing before adjournment, y'all have really well as I hold it up, but y'all have your training schedules that we provide you all. Please make sure to evaluate those, and if you need hours, there's opportunities listed on the bottom. And then if you have any questions about that, please contact Sheriff and staff, and they can always looking for further training opportunities for you, and we'll help you any way we can. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
On that, Tim, the webinars that are listed are really good, because I've done 3 of them so far, and there's a 4th one coming up tomorrow at 1 o'clock from the same organization.
There you go. There's the ringing endorsement. So I encourage everybody to get online and watch those if you have an opportunity.
Very good. Does anybody else have any comments tonight?
Yeah, I do. This is Scott. So if this is just going back to the first item that we had, A, am I to understand that we're tabling that until we can reconvene in person?
I'd have to go back and see exactly what the motion was. I think the motion did say we had to be in person.
Yeah. I would, and this is for the city in general. I think we have to rethink that in the future, because it seems to me that anybody can get on and say, well, I couldn't hear something, and then the city's business stops. Our IT people said it was functioning as intended on YouTube. So I think it's a larger issue that the city's going to have to grapple with.
I want to check the playback, and of course IT will be checking the playback also, to see if in fact the YouTube was bad. It could have been a connection on their end. I have no clue. But if we find out that the YouTube was working well, BTS was working well, I could see us pressing onward.
So,
Yes, well, certainly, Mr. Chairman, we will do a post-op on public comment, because it does impact future council meetings and any time we have public comment. So we will do a evaluation of good, bad, differently. This was really the first time we've had public comment on one of these online meetings, and always will be, could be glitches, don't know. We'll evaluate it to make
Yeah,
sure.
but what they were saying though,
yeah,
it was the
so just,
broadcast. They were picking up every third, fourth word on the entire broadcast, not just public comment, is what I thought I heard her say.
or the broadcast at that point, during that item. Just FYI, what Tim said is correct. We had the 3 public hearings at our April meeting, but we had no public comment. We had no public hearing, folks. So this was the first practice to do that. So hopefully we can learn and do a better job. It also depends on, I know my connection has been shaky, and that's after new routers and increase in my BTS speed, et cetera. Some of that is just how many Zooms, et cetera. So, but the other thing is we are able to have these electronic meetings only because the governor has made special allowance. So we're hoping that it will become law. First off, hoping that it stays in place next week, but also that it can be passed by the legislature to be okay, or we will also be looking at our charter to see if we can add it to our charter to allow us to have electronic meetings. So this is all new. So I think what we did tonight was practice, a real important practice, and getting better at it as we do it. So, and I appreciate our IT and John in community relations, what they've done to help make this happen, and how hard it is for people at home. Appreciate Sheriff and parenting and trying to work and do a meeting, etc. So anyway, we're learning. So
the question I would have is, if the May 1 order allows us to have public meetings again, however, requires 6-foot spacing, can we set up the Slater Center to have a public meeting where we can meet and have the spacing?
Well, certainly as the orders, any new orders come down, we will look at the opportunities and do appropriate things, and look at the Slater Center or other venues to see if we can meet those requirements of any orders that are out there.
All right.
yeah. Yeah, we don't know what else about whether it's 10 or more people, it depends on what the rest of the parts are. So
I understand. I know some cities are doing things where they allow one person to come in and speak at a time, make them stay out in the lobby or whatever. But we do need to get past this as fast as we can. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments?
Mr. Chairman, in spite of In spite of many obstacles, you were adequate.
Thank you. I strive to be adequate.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Everybody go home. Everybody is home.
Yeah, we're home.
Thanks, guys. Really
All right.
appreciate
All
it.
right. Bye, everyone. Be safe.
Thanks, everybody.